the mild-mannered physicist in his laboratory doing an experiment in his box has to be aware that his little experiment will be affected by what's going on in the larger world and in the cosmos beyond.
Beyond, for example, even the speed of light.
Beyond the speed of light.
Keep watching to learn more. For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, and this is part 2 of our 2-part series on miracles of mind with Russell Targ, author of a number of books on parapsychological functioning, including Mind Reach, The Mind Race, Mind at Large, and most recently, Miracles of Mind. Russell is the co-founder of the Remote Viewing Research Program at SRI International. He conducted remote viewing research for a decade under the auspices of the United States Government Military Intelligence Establishment. In addition to that, he's a pioneer laser scientist and worked for a dozen years at Lockheed Corporation designing laser-based remote sensing systems for aviation. Welcome again, Russell.
Happy to be here, Jeffrey.
It's a pleasure to be with you. In part 1 of this 2-part series, we covered a lot of hardcore empirical scientific data in the field of clairvoyance or remote viewing, extrasensory perception, whatever you want to call it. There are many names. Psychic functioning, we could say. Now we're going to be talking more about the scientific meaning of this work. Many people would tell you that this is impossible, that it contradicts all that we have carefully gathered about scientific functioning for the last 300 years. Obviously, you don't think so.
It doesn't contradict the basic ideas of modern physics. In modern physics, we now know that there's more to life than the nuts and bolts you can hold in your hand. Quantum physics says that our awareness is extended. The eminent physicist David Bohm talks about quantum interconnectedness, the extent to which we have expanded awareness in space and time. Though Bohm was not interested in psychic things particularly, he was interested in the extent to which ordinary elementary particles, like photons, have expanded spheres of influence so that photons traveling away from each other at the speed of light are still connected with each other. He did analysis and designed experiments supporting ideas that Einstein had in the 30s, and these are all now accepted by modern physics. It's no longer controversial to talk about non-local connections.
What does non-local precisely mean to a physicist?
Well, locality means that if you've got a marble on your table, that's all there is just the marble and the table. But physics now knows that there are forces acting on that are outside of the arena where you would think forces would normally act on that. It has a larger sphere of influence. I'm not talking about electronic forces or gravitational forces, but there are quantum mechanical forces that are real and have effects and can be detected, have been detected, that says that the mild-mannered physicist in his laboratory doing an experiment in his box has to be aware that his little experiment will be affected by what's going on in the larger world and in the cosmos beyond.
Beyond, for example, even the speed of light.
Beyond the speed of light. This is not to say that you can send messages faster than the speed of light. Einstein was concerned that this non-local connection would allow us to send messages faster than the speed of light, which is forbidden by general relativity. Mm-hmm. And Einstein raised the flag saying that there must be something the matter with quantum mechanics. Well, Einstein was correct that there is this non-local extended interaction, but he was mistaken in the idea that this violated relativity, which it does not. We are connected, but you can't send a message using this connection.
Well, isn't the remote viewing research or telepathy an example of a message that seems to be somehow being communicated?
That's exactly true. The remote viewing is an example of extended or expanded awareness in which you do get information. And it's important that I'm not saying that the data from the non-locality experiments with photons is the explanation for ESP. It might be right, but we haven't shown that. Mm-hmm. But what the data from these interconnected photons show is that we live in a non-local world, mm-hmm. that our thoughts have effect, that our awareness extends beyond the ordinary constraints of time and space, and we have proven that. We know that a person sitting in the laboratory can describe and experience what's going on not only in the distance, but in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, you seem to be saying, if I can paraphrase you, Russell, that if we want to explain the work that you did for over a decade at SRI International, funded by the CIA, showing over and over again that remote viewing works and has serious concrete applications, say for military intelligence, if we want to understand that, we're going to do better, instead of thinking of a mechanism, to think of the fundamental principle that the mystics have always talked about, which is that we are all one.
The mystics certainly describe this in a unitary state. Mm-hmm. It is Patanjali said, as we described in the earlier program, that if you quiet your mind, you can look into the distance, look into the futures, look into bodies, communicate with animals, do a wide variety of very surprising things, seeing the large and seeing the small. And his conclusion, and the Buddhist conclusion, is that separation is an illusion.
Patanjali, incidentally, is the author of the Yoga Sutras.
Yes. And he has a book in print today called How to Know God, which is a
latest translation,
still in print, because he described with such precision the different meditative transcendent states that are available, how to do it, and what you get.
Mm-hmm. So it's perhaps not so much a question of information traveling from the future back to the present, or from Russia over the ocean to the United States to enter into the mind of a remote viewer. It's more that the mind of the remote viewer is already there.
That's right. My view of how this works that fits our data mm-hmm. is that we misunderstand the nature of separation. Mm-hmm. There is no doubt that people can experience what's going on in a distant place, and physics has no explanation about how the signal would get from here to there. What I've been proposing for some time, and what fits the data, is that the error is in our measurement of what separate means. Mm-hmm. There's an aspect to which people who are physically separated from one another are in another realm, not separate. And this is what the mystics have been saying for millennia from their direct mm-hmm. experience.
We often think of ourselves as unique, separate individuals, but it might be, as William James once said, more like the islands of the ocean. They appear to be separate when you look at them on the surface, but down at the ocean floor, they're all connected.
That's right. All the mystics said the same thing, Jeffrey. There's Buddha, Patanjali, Jesus, Blake, Emerson. Whenever a mystic sits quietly on a rock and makes himself at one with the universe, he or she has the same experience. You don't want to leave out Hildegard von Bingen, who is one of the great mystics of the 11th century. And all these mystics were trying as best they could to share their experience with us, to give us a recipe so we could have the unitary experience that they're having. And by unitary experience, I mean transcendence, so that your experience is expanded beyond your ordinary self to participate in your spiritual community, which is what all the mystics talked about. And what's interesting is this unitary experience, as the mystics described, is common for all the mystics, independent of what eventually became their religious discipline. And we would say today that what the mystics describe, their experience is data. Mm-hmm. Because they would say, here's what we did, here's what you can do, and after you do it, report back to me and tell me what you experienced. Mm-hmm. So this is a very scientific protocol. There's nothing unscientific about the data that the mystics have shared with us over these years.
The mystics, apparently, such as Patanjali, were aware of the kind of phenomenon that you call remote viewing, but they didn't perform scientific studies of remote viewing as you have done.
No, they did not.
So in a sense, we're in a new age in that regard. But let me jump
We've greatly democratized these mystical experiences.
Yeah. Now the mystical experience of oneness is not a new thing. It's been reported for a long time, and Freud was aware of it. He dismissed it. He said that this consciousness of oneness is nothing more than a regression to an infantile state.
That's right. Ken Wilber has written more than one book on what he calls the pre-trance fallacy, whereas Freud considered mystical experiences a regression toward infantile behavior, whereas Jung considered it a very advanced post-rational experience where you have gone through a rational way of living past your analytical capabilities so that you are experiencing a transcendent experience. You've gone beyond the rational rather than regressing to the childhood. You have the rational basis upon which to stand, and then you can go beyond that.
I think most people would agree that if one is capable of using clairvoyance in military intelligence operations, that's probably not a regression to an infantile state.
The psychic abilities are not an illusion. There's a wide variety of things you can do with your non-local mind. And we try and empower people to make use of the expanded awareness. And they can do a variety of things. They can spy on the Russians, as we did. You can look into the future and forecast changes in the silver commodity market, which we did with great success. Two mild-mannered authors were able to forecast silver futures, and you actually participated in those experiments.
I was very eager to participate in those experiments, and they are reported in detail, not only in the the Journal of Scientific Exploration, but also in your book, Miracles of Mind. I do think there's a caveat, which is you were able to forecast the silver futures, but no actual investments were made.
We were not trading.
Yeah. And all of this raises the issue of how does one take a spiritual gift like remote viewing, which is described in the spiritual literature, and justify it in the context of financial forecasting or spying on the Russians? There seems to be some sort of a disconnect.
We think that psychic abilities are powerful, but they're just abilities. And they can be used for spying on the Russians, looking for parking places, finding your car keys, or experiencing God. And you have the opportunity to do all of those things.
Well, it would seem to me that what you're saying, it's not the psychic functioning that is spiritual per se. It might have something to do with the human attitude that we take towards it.
I think that's right. You can use vision to look at a rose window at Chartres Cathedral, or your hearing ability to listen to the transcendent music of Hildegard von Bingen, or your psychic experiences to reach out and have a unitary experience and a opening to this feeling of oneness that the mystics are so interested in. All of these meditative, quiet experiences, from remote viewing to a transcendent experience of knowing God, all require that you find a way to quiet your mind.
Now, most of the mystical traditions warn against dwelling in the psychic realm. They often say that the goal of a mystical path is to achieve a state of enlightenment, which means transcending the ego, moving beyond the ego. But when you do psychic work, there's a strong possibility you'll become attached and think, oh, it was me, this famous, important scientist, or this, terrific psychic who's doing these things, and that gets us more caught up in the world of attachment.
That's absolutely right. The religious tradition pertaining to psychic activity, psychic abilities, is that God won't let you use your ESP to enrich yourself. That's untrue. God doesn't care what you do with your psychic abilities. But the joke is that by the time you get very, very good at using your psychic abilities, so that you reliably can forecast silver futures, by that time you've gotten uninterested in silver. And that was one of the shocking things that even occurred to us. We were pressured, urged by a broker who was carrying out our activities. Now that you found out how to do this, let's make $1 billion in the silver market. And that became surprisingly less interesting for us to do. Not that we've become mystics, but the whole process seemed like a trivialization of an ability that had much more worthwhile things to pursue.
One of the things that you've written about, Russell, is that when groups of people come together to experiment or explore, might be a better term, remote viewing or intuition or psychic functioning, that they form what some of the American Indians have called the long body, or the community of spirit, that the kind of a connection occurs amongst these people which is more intimate than most groups experience.
I think that's true. In all of our remote viewing, both at SRI and in our recent experiments, we dwelt very heavily on having a feeling of coherence among our group, so that we would debrief, get rid of any discordant elements, of which there were plenty, because we're pursuing an arena where we don't understand how everything works. But we would make sure before each individual trial that we were all harmonious on what we were doing, what it meant, and what we wanted the outcome to be. And we feel that harmonious, coherent interactions among all the players is very important.
It almost seems, though, that the kind of group dynamics required to produce these extraordinarily successful remote viewings, such as the ones you've been engaging in for decades, it's not so different than the dynamics that one hears described, let's say, in a winning athletic team.
I think that's true. The winning athletes transcend their ordinary experience. They're frequently in an altered state of consciousness. A basketball player in the San Francisco team scored a goal from mid-court. They said, well, how did you do that? He said, well, I just visualized the green light going from my hand into the basket and just let it go. That was Wilt Chamberlain who described that. Just follow the light into the basket. The mystic would have said the same thing. And Jesus, in his writing, says that the kingdom of God is within you. His disciples were always asking, where do I go? Where do I look for God? And whenever a mystic quiets his mind, he finds it is a unitary experience, that God and he are one. And it's that experience of the quiet mind that not comes from remote viewing, but the quiet mind that you use to look into the future is the same quiet mind that allows you to have the experience of being overcome by love, residing in this transcendent states that the mystics throughout the ages have talked about.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned in part one of our two-part series is that you had discovered after 20 years that remote viewing is free, by which you meant you don't have to go through elaborate training programs to do remote viewing. It's really just a question of focus and relaxation.
Yes, if you will find a friend who will hide a little object for you on the kitchen table and then sit with you and interview you about what you're experiencing with regard to that object, you surprisingly can learn to separate out the psychic signal from the mental noise. You do not have to give me all your money. You do not have to eat porridge at the feet of your guru. You just have to learn to quiet your mind and visualize what your friend has hidden. And then in a few minutes, your friend will bring you the object and said, these elements that you saw were correct and these were incorrect just from your memory and your guessing. So you have to learn to get rid of memory and imagination and analysis. Analysis is the enemy of psychic functioning. So in doing these little tabletop experiments in remote viewing at home, you want your friend to choose something and tell you nothing about it. For example, if you go to a psychic at the street corner and she says, sit down, tell me your name, where are you from, what do you want, that would not be a genuine psychic. An experienced psychic says, hello, don't tell me anything. Everything you tell me interferes with my ability to do a reading for you. So a genuine psychic knows that she wants to know nothing about you. She wants to work from a blank slate.
And so when you say analysis interferes with psychic functioning, so that we can be very clear, it interferes with the act of clairvoyance or telepathy or remote viewing or extrasensory perception, that as a scientist you want to apply analysis.
Yes. What I mean is that it's harder, if I tell you I'm thinking of a number from 1 to 10, it's harder for you to guess my number from 1 to 10 than it would be for you to guess a place that I'm visualizing anywhere on the planet from an infinitude of possible places. Because in the 1 to 10 game, you say, well, it's not 1, it's not 10, it's probably not 7, and then you guess some other number, and it turns out to be an analysis and guessing game. But if I tell you I'm visualizing a place that you've probably never seen, you say, okay, I give up. I'm going to close my eyes and look for a surprise against my blank slate. And even though there's infinitely many places for me to visualize, that's a surprisingly easy thing to do.
Well, let me ask you this, Russell. Let's assume for the moment that you and me and many of our viewers can experience remote viewing. Why would somebody want to do that? How would it make a difference in anybody's life?
It's empowering in a person's life. It's like walking on fire. It gives you a surprising power and control over your destiny and over your experience. In addition to being able to find your car keys in a parking place psychically, it makes you aware that you can live in a larger world. One of the most abundant and important uses of psychic ability is in spiritual healing, where the spiritual healer is able to surrender herself with the desire of healing the sick person and sending a healing template to the person who is sick to allow them to become well and muster their own immune system to improve their state. And with the healing experiments I'm describing, work has been done in double-blind studies in hospitals around the world and in the remote viewing as well. I'm not describing a few best-ever trials, but this work has been published in prestigious journals and done in laboratories in America and England and Holland and Germany. Many, many different scientific laboratories have repeated both the spiritual healing and the remote viewing.
And I think it's worth mentioning, at least as a footnote, that one of the leading researchers today in the field of psychic healing is your daughter, Dr. Elizabeth Targ.
Yes, she's been very successful in doing spiritual healing, or distant healing, she would say, with AIDS patients. And the AIDS patients who received the prayers did significantly better than the people for whom no prayers were said. So even if you don't believe in God and someone offers to pray for you, you should accept the prayers.
It can't hurt.
That's right.
I think also another benefit for people in experiencing remote viewing or experiencing healing, or as you refer to these things, miracles of mind, is just to open us up to a world of larger possibilities, to be able to appreciate that many things that we, in our prison of a mind, may think, this is impossible or that is impossible. If we can let go of some of those belief systems, we may discover that things are possible in our lives that we weren't able to appreciate.
That's definitely true. The amazing things that I have seen is our ability to look into the future and describe what will happen. And the things that I've seen my co-author, Jane Catra, do as a spiritual healer, where a man doubled over with arthritis, after a few minutes of being in her presence, left his canes on the floor and rose to his feet and walked across the room and astonished his wife, who said that man hasn't gotten out of a chair in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see that occur with no hands-on, no massage, no hypnosis, just something is communicated that relieves the pain, and the person is able to spring to his feet and walk off.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have less than a minute now, Russell, but I should say that your very presence here at this moment is something of a miracle, because you were given a diagnosis of a life-threatening cancer that was healed in your work with Jane.
Yes, I was diagnosed with cancer, and they were ready to start chemotherapy. And Jane said, but first, would you consider not only peas and carrots, but prayer and meditation, and I'll teach you how to do visualization. And 6 years later, here I am.
Well, Russell Targ, I'm delighted that you are here. I know you were given a 6-month sentence 6 years ago, so your very presence now is a testimony to the miracles of mind.
I'm very happy to be with you.
Russell, thank you so much for being with me. And thank you for being with us.
For early access to our videos and live stream events, sign up for our free weekly newsletter at newthinkingaloud.org.
Book 4 in the New Thinking Aloud dialogue series is Charles T. Tart, 70 Years of Exploring Consciousness and Parapsychology, now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download all 8 copies of the New Thinking Aloud magazine for free, or order beautiful printed copies. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.